Hello, TechPod listeners. Will here. Before we start the podcast, I wanted to ask a favor. We're a few months into the show and would love to know how we're doing. So we put up the first TechPod survey. We want to find out what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to hear more of, and what you'd like to hear less of from us each week. This isn't about collecting demographics for advertisers. It's a way for you to directly impact the future of the show. The address is survey.content.town. Again, the address is survey.content.town. And now, on with the show. My kid's school flooded.
Oh,
the other
no, I
day.
heard, that's right. I saw you talking about that. That sounds like a bad thing. I mean, like a benign bad thing, right? It's like it's kind of a low-key disaster.
It is. It's as disasters go, it's the one you want.
Nobody got hurt.
Nobody got hurt.
I hope.
It was definitely traumatic for the kids. They were sitting there. It was raining. Like we had an inch of rain in 25 minutes in Pacifica last Thursday.
That storm was really something. Like, man, not to digress here. I feel like I'm developing a bad habit of just assuming that every extreme weather event is related to climate change, and I don't know if that's that's probably painting with an overly broad brush.
I think that is probably the way things are going to be going forward.
But we have had some real humdingers of storm here the last few months.
I mean, we had massive fires in the fall. We had high winds.
The fires I know are related, but storms, bad storms happen.
I mean, the whole point of climate change is not that like it's going to get colder or warmer necessarily, but like all the weather is going to be more intense because there's more energy in the atmosphere.
These were some intense ass storms.
Yeah. So there we go. So they flooded, and she said like it happened immediately after school started, but they're sitting there looking like they're doing reading time. And one of the kids says, "Hey, look, there's a bunch of water out the window." And the courtyard outside their window had filled up to the point that it was starting to come under the door from the outside.
How is there no drainage out there?
Well, there is, but it got backed up and it was backed up under in the drain so nobody could see it. Luckily, the city got there really fast, but like by the time I got there to pick them up from school, they shut down the school. By the time I got there to pick them up, there was like 4.5, 5 inches of water in the hallway of the classrooms. Wow. So they luckily it was a 4-day weekend anyway. So they just shut down school on Thursday and Friday, and they're going to be someplace else Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week. And then it's hopefully back to normal in a perfectly cleaned out school. But man, talk to your school about their emergency preparedness plan. It turns out
didn't go well.
It went pretty well.
Okay.
If it had been a real emergency and people had been hurt, it would have been bad.
Yikes.
But luckily everybody was fine, and like the kids were mildly traumatized. I think they watched The Secret Life of Pets 2 in the gym while they were waiting for all the kids to come. So
that'll bring anybody back down to earth.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad.
See, thank you for not welcoming yourself. I was welcoming them, not you.
I'm learning.
It's like you've never done a podcast before.
Yeah, what is that?
It's an audio file that's like has an RSS feed attached to it so people can download it with a tool called a podcatcher.
And the show is educational.
Remember when we used to remember podcatchers?
Sure.
Remember before there were apps?
My old podcatcher's mitt hanging up behind the factory.
Yeah.
You
got to put that need foot oil in there. Yep. Yep.
That's the one.
Yep. Rub that oil.
Uh-huh.
I remember the first time I heard about podcasts. And I was like, man, that sounds neat. Anybody can make a radio show? But audio production stuff's too expensive. Who's going to do that?
That'll never catch on.
Yeah, nobody's ever going to do that.
Yeah.
What are we talking about this week, Brad?
InfoSec. I love saying that word.
Really?
InfoSec and OPSEC are words that... because
I just imagine people who are really angry all the time yelling at me.
Well, that is definitely one constituency, probably. But I don't know. To me, talking about InfoSec makes you feel kind of like you live in a spy movie. You got important stuff to protect.
Like maybe Dan Aykroyd is telling you that the man is out to get you all the time. You got to pay attention to C-Tech astronomy.
But I mean, instead of James Bond, it's really more like hackers, like zero cool kind of shit, I guess. Like it's kind of it's a little bit cheesy and absurd, but also very important in this day and age. Well, in information security, is what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's one of those things that like when I worked at the computer magazine, people always yelled at us about bad information security stuff, and they were right to.
Yeah. But people... I mean, it's been a while since you read a magazine. And back then, it was just less dangerous out there.
Well,
it's gotten a lot worse in the last few years.
Yeah, as people spend more time online and have more of their stuff online that is of value, like their bank accounts and their credit cards and all that stuff.
Like there are just way more vectors into somebody's personal life now.
Yeah,
electronic vectors, ways to access finances and information and all that stuff.
And if you handle your stuff poorly, then like you can get into real trouble now. It like 20 years ago, it was like an annoyance and you'd lose your Yahoo Mail account or whatever. But ultimately, who cares? Now, if you lose access to your bank account, somebody can destroy your credit and just absolutely wreck you,
or like your whole identity. Not even just your money, but like I haven't read too deeply into what happened, but I've just seen in general like horror stories about like, I had my identity stolen and it took like months or a couple of years to get like, because think about all the bureaucracy you have to go through to like get everything fixed. Well, and all the information stuff put back.
And also like the Matt Honan hack is one of the more famous ones. Matt Honan was a reporter for Gizmodo, then I think he was at Wired at the time this happened. I can't remember, but he's at BuzzFeed now. And he logged on to it. He's sitting on his Mac one day and stuff just started getting deleted from his hard drive.
Like visibly, like he was watching it happen?
Yeah, like he got logged out and when he turned it back on, it was like it was a brand new computer.
Wow.
And then he picked up his phone and the same thing happened there. And what had happened was somebody had hacked him. I want to say they went through Amazon to get his credit card number. Like somebody impersonated him on Amazon, called using information they were able to get from another site.
Okay.
And used that to get his credit card number from them. And then used the credit card number to get Verizon or whoever his cell phone provider was to give access to his SIM, to dupe his SIM basically and turn off his old SIM. And then used all of that to lost password everything else.
Crap.
Yeah. So once that happened, they took over everything that he owned, I think, except they didn't get his Twitter, maybe. And that's what they wanted.
Because he's an important thing.
Well, he's at Matt on Twitter.
Oh, wow.
So it's 3 letters. It's a really valuable account.
Yeah. How much do you think you could sell that account for?
$200,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So
man, I'd do that in a heartbeat.
It would be an easy decision. But anyway, the point is, like, it took him forever to unravel that. And he did a really good article, I think it was for Wired, that explained like the whole process of restoring everything.
Oh, wow. I want to read that.
It's a fascinating article. His name's Matt Honan, Honan.
Okay.
And if I remember, I'll put it in the show notes.
Not to, this is maybe putting the cart before the horse a little bit because we haven't even really gotten into the basics here.
Yeah.
But that form of social engineering is the one that actually scares me the most because there really aren't a lot of technological safeguards against it. It's really more having to worry about human beings doing the right thing.
Well, it's interesting you say that because that's starting to change.
Really?
Yeah. So Google, the reason this is an interesting thing to talk about this week is Google just opened up the advanced protection program to everyone.
Okay.
So previously this was for like celebrities and politicians. It's something that I think they created as a result to the hacks on the Hillary Clinton campaign.
Okay.
Like the Podesta emails and all that, which were on Gmail.
Yeah. And another one I had forgotten about was the, was it Sony Pictures, one of the major movie studios?
Sony got hacked by North Korea, which is why Spider-Man is in the MCU now.
Right.
For real.
Yeah. No, I remember a lot of that stuff. There have been some very high profile data breaches in the last few years is the point.
Yeah. And so the advanced protection stuff is basically, we'll talk about it more toward the end because it's not something that most people should do on their main Gmail account. But what it does is it says, hey, you have to have 2 hardware authenticators.
In tandem?
No, not in tandem. One is a backup and one is the live one.
It's an either or.
Yeah, okay. Because they're going to take away.
Because I was envisioning like the straight up nuclear, like insert 2 keys and
turn your keys, sir.
Turn both keys at the same time.
No, it's not like that.
Okay.
But what it is it turns off all of the non-hardware encryption ways to recover your account. So, for example, right now, if I lose my 2-factor authentication for my account, I can use the recovery codes, or I can send an email to an email address and then click a link, and that will let me go back and do that. However, if you're dealing with like a state agency who might hijack that email or may hijack your domain encryption and reroute your mail at the router level, at the DNS level to steal the recovery information, there's not a whole lot you can do to protect against that stuff. Same thing as if somebody hijacks your SIM card. So if you have your Google set to send a text to recover your account, if somebody calls your cell phone provider and hijacks that SIM, then they can get that, and there's nothing you can do to fix that.
Yeah.
So what this does is basically takes all of that stuff out and replaces it with like YubiKeys or an Android device, or I think an iOS device now.
Physical item you have to keep on your person.
Exactly. Like that is a great solution for famous people, the fames, the politicians, people who are going to be hijacked by like dedicated state level hackers,
the upper crust.
Yes. It has some real downsides in that like you can't connect anything to your at the API level to your Google account.
No third-party apps.
So no third-party apps. You can't use I assume that means you can't use Apple Mail on your iPhone. You have to use the Gmail client, stuff like that. So, but I think it's always a good time to talk about InfoSec.
Yeah.
And how to be safe. And
so what is the official name of this again? Advanced Protection Program?
It is the Google Advanced Protection Program.
Yeah, I had never heard of this before you brought it up.
It is relatively new, and I think you used to have to be kind of invited to it.
Okay. This reminds me a lot of the filtering options that Twitter used to only give to verified accounts that now anybody can access.
Yeah, exactly. It's similar to that
similar situation.
And I think if you have a Twitter account that is liable to be hacked, that is like a target for hacking, then they'll lock it down. Like a lot of places now you can call and say, "Hey, don't let anybody change my password over the phone or whatever." But like for normal people, it's a lot less complicated than that. Like there's some basic stuff you can do that like makes you safe. That starts with always using a password manager. Like don't use the same password multiple places.
Is that the number one piece of advice you would give?
I think so.
I have a list of things that I think are best practices around this issue, but I have no idea if they're actually, if the experts would agree. I guess I could see the two that come to mind are password manager and two-factor, but I guess they kind of go hand in hand.
Well, it's okay. So there's one other thing we should think about first. One is that you don't want, especially if you're in any way publicly visible, don't make your recovery email address something that people are going to know. So like the security through obscurity is generally speaking bad, but if you have a public facing email address, like my work email is will@foovr, don't make that the recovery email for all of your other stuff. Be thoughtful about what gets recovery emails and how you can recover accounts, because it turns out like once you do all this, once you do two-factor authentication, once you do a password manager, so you're not doing the same passwords everywhere, and you have to have a hardware encryption, the easiest way to hijack an account is to do the lost password thing. And if that, like, I think what I might do is set up another Gmail account that's just for recovering accounts and put the super duper protection stuff on that.
Interesting.
Okay. So that then that stuff is locked down. It's not tied to my SIM card anymore.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because I feel like the thing that worries me is now you can call Verizon or AT&T and say, "Hey, I need to lock my account so that people can't change the SIM card unless I show up in person at a store and present ID." Which solves like 90% of the phishing problems.
Interesting. But you have to opt into that?
But you have to opt into that. Well, because customer's always right. People don't want to go to the store, whatever. Yeah. But to jump back to the key thing. So password managers like 1Password, LastPass. You said you're using Bitdefender for encryption now. Bitwarden. I really, whatever. I don't know if we want to sit here and talk about competing password managers all day long. But I like it because it's open source, which is just nice from an auditing perspective. It's, if all the code is out there, you can be pretty sure it's quite secure. Where do you save the password files?
So that's an interesting question. They store them remotely by default.
Okay.
They have
on a server?
Yes.
Do you pay?
No. So their free offering is incredibly robust.
Oh, okay.
So basically what happened was I switched from 1Password.
When they went to the subscription model?
No, I had bought a proper license back in the day when they just sold licenses for versions.
Yeah.
And the Chrome plugin for the version that I bought broke.
Oh.
Because Google changed the way they sign Chrome, and 1Password's response was like, "Hey, to get a working Chrome plugin, you should upgrade to our subscription model." And I was like, "Nah, why don't I find a competing product?"
Yeah. I had already upgraded at that point. I would have dumped them at that moment.
Like it was just so people were actually hex editing the Chrome executable, which I know is a terrible idea, but they literally just replaced the string, the company name string, to what it used to be, and that made the plugin work again. And when it was like that level of change is what was preventing it from working. I know this is incredibly old man shaking cane.
No, that sucks. Like
it was a bad customer experience. It really put me out, and that's what got me looking at other stuff.
So my feeling on password managers and stuff like that is that anything I really rely on, I'm happy to pay for.
Yeah.
I felt like that company, and it's a small developer. I get it. Yeah. Like you have to have recurring revenue, and like that product is basically feature complete at this point, and they don't need to add stuff to it, but they need to keep existing.
That's fair.
Like I want them to keep existing so they can keep updating the product.
Yeah.
If I were starting now, I probably wouldn't use 1Password. I just put my parents on 1Password over the Thanksgiving holiday, and it was like a 14-hour nightmare.
Ooh, yeah. To be fair, I feel like that's probably true of just about every one on the market.
None of them are great.
Yeah.
So I read the Wirecutter review before we came here to see if they had a recommendation.
Yeah, plenty of them are fine for people who are, pretty tech savvy, but for your parents, I can't think of a single one that's really going to be that friendly.
There's always, so the takeaway is after I got them on board and got them using it, it seems to have stuck.
Okay.
Like previously they had a file in Notes that each of them had all of their passwords.
Yeah.
But they didn't write the passwords down. They just put like hints to the passwords.
Oh, that's better than just plain text.
No.
I mean, it's not good, but it's a little bit better.
Look, getting them switched over, I got locked out of so many accounts trying to guess the passwords.
Yeah.
It was like a beautiful mind in there because they weren't putting new lines or anything. It was just like a giant.
Wow.
Anyway, the point is, once there's a pain process when you switch to the password manager, no matter which one you choose.
It takes a little work. Sure.
And like the first week or two are going to be really frustrating. But once you get through to the point that you're using it reliably and most of your passwords are just in there and you just press your thumb on the fingerprint sensor or look at the phone, it's magic.
Once the biometric integration happened, this was even with when I was still using 1Password. I mean, it's been a few years now.
Yeah.
But that was the thing. I mean, I used it before, but it was more like I used it grudgingly.
Yeah.
But once that came about is when I got excited about using it because it made it so seamless.
Well, and now like for a while you couldn't create new passwords from apps and stuff like that, and now the keyboard integration in iOS and Android are both so seamless that like I think the password manager works better on my phone than it does on my PC now.
Interesting.
Because of the biometrics. Like I don't have to so I have one really long passphrase that I remember. It's literally the only password I have to remember anymore.
And that's for your vault?
That's for the vault, yeah. And then you have to save the other stuff. Like you have to save the backup keys to get access to that vault someplace else on a piece of paper, presumably. But the nice thing is like 1Password, LastPass, KeePass, all of those handled the two-factor authentication, software two-factor authentication too, which means if you're syncing them across multiple devices, you have the two-factor authenticator just built into the password manager, which is, I feel like that's maybe not super secure, but is very convenient.
Yeah.
And like a good password manager will also tell you things like, hey, you have the same password on these two accounts that you created before you were using me, or hey, this service had a breach and you should probably change the password on it, or this service was hacked and they lost all their passwords because they were a-holes and didn't salt and hash the passwords. So you need to reset this password too.
Do you have any InfoSec breach stories?
I have lost credit card. For a while I was replacing Bank of America credit cards every 3 months or 6 months.
Well, I feel like that's a little different. I mean, those can just get skimmed at an ATM or in a drugstore or something like that. Like that's not your fault, is what I'm saying.
They were getting hacked at the processing centers.
Oh, not off your card?
Yeah, it wasn't off my card. So they were having to replace hundreds of thousands of cards at once.
Wow.
Yeah, it was bad.
That's rough. I had my I had my lifetime kind of store credit that I'd built up on delivery.com stolen.
Oh no!
I made that delivery.com account like 15 years ago or something, and used a shitty password that I reused too many times.
Oh yeah,
and I forgot to change that. It was like $65 worth of free food that I never used. Too bad. And somebody logged into that account in like Brooklyn or the Bronx or somewhere, ordered a bunch of wings and soda. So that money went away.
So Gina had somebody in Louisiana steal her Starbucks login. Which, like, I don't know if you use the Starbucks app, but it is actually money. Like, you can't add credit to it if you don't have the password.
Okay.
Sorry, if you don't know the credit card number, if you don't know the security code on the credit card number.
Okay.
But you can spend the money that's in the account.
Okay.
It's like a gift card basically. So people were going up and like when I was like, she was like, hey, did you buy Starbucks the other day? I was like,
eat a ton of Starbucks?
Did you buy $62 worth of Starbucks the other day? I was like, no. And she said, I got to call them. So she called, and when they went back through a year's worth of use, and she was like, they spent like $400 in $10 chunks
Yikes.
over a year, an 8-month period or something.
It's intense.
And and they refunded it, of course.
Okay.
But like you got to pay attention to that stuff. And there's so much of it now.
That's good of them. I never got my delivery cash. I never got my food bucks back.
Well, so the nice thing was that was the thing that convinced Gina finally to buck down, to do the 2 weeks. And now she's all in. Like she's like, I can't believe I didn't do this 10 years ago when you told me to.
Right.
Because it's so much more convenient now than having to remember that stuff the old way.
Do you generate every single password you use now?
Every single one.
Really?
Yeah.
No kidding. I do it for anything remotely important.
I just do it for everything.
I still have some kind of like stuff I just remember for like services I don't really care about. But
the only ones that I do manually sometimes I switch from like the just gibberish, like letters, symbols, and numbers all mixed up, to like the words with the hyphens between them.
Yeah.
I use those for things like Netflix and PlayStation and Xbox and things like that I might have to type in manually.
Yeah, like I don't know, I'm certainly no cryptographer or like, I'm not in that world necessarily, but isn't it the case that like an intelligible English passphrase is like considered a strong, like from a brute force cracking perspective, like that's a pretty strong way to go, right?
So like there's all sorts of ways to attack that stuff. Like there's these things called rainbow tables that basically have every combination of words that are in the English language and names and common things, which is why we put symbols and numbers and stuff on our passwords now. It's my understanding is that it's pretty difficult. Like the length is the thing that is more important than anything else.
Interesting. Okay.
Assuming you're not just using common English phrases or English words.
Right.
But the upshot is if you do that right, nobody else will ever have access. So for example, like 1Password has a secret key that gives you access to the thing, and then it's like 3 chunks of data that have to be there in order for somebody to hack your password. So they automatically create something that's pretty good, and then your password is just like icing on top of that already good code. Okay, two-factor authentication. Brad,
use it and love it.
Yes.
Well, don't love it. I mean, it's a pain. It's a chore.
Well, if your password manager is good, it's not.
I guess so.
Because like mine just automatically fills it in. Yeah. It just pops in with like when it recognizes. So, but what it is how you go to the ATM? Do you just walk up to the ATM and you're like, yo, I'm Brad Shoemaker, give me money?
Yes, they heard I was coming.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, you have to bring a card.
They rolled out the red card.
You have to have a thing, and you have to have something and know something.
Yeah.
So two-factor authentication.
That is a phrase that I have become acquainted with as I started kind of caring more about this stuff.
Yeah.
A thing you have and a thing you know.
Yeah. So in this case,
that's the golden kind of combo, right?
Yeah. The thing you have is a device that has an algorithm generator on it that's tied to the time, and it generates a code that's good for like 30 or 40 seconds or a minute, whatever. And then that code expires and you have to get another one. And it just keeps prompting new codes all the time. And it's generated with math that is unassailable or difficult to assail. There's also these things called hardware two-factor authentication, which is what we talked about with the Google Protection Program. And like YubiKey is a big vendor of these. I think if you sign up for like an Ars Premium subscription, they'll send you a free YubiKey now.
And that's a brand name, to be clear.
It's a brand name.
YUBI.
YUBI.
Okay. I always wondered if that was a generic term or if that was just a company that's making them.
It's the company that's making them, and they have all sorts of different models and strengths of encryption based on whether you need like government level, but that is a hardware thing. The interesting thing about YubiKey specifically in the hardware encryption is that Google claims that they've never had a data breach on an account that was secured with a hardware 2FA.
Interesting. And does an authenticator app on your phone count in the same vein? Like, no. Is that not as good?
Those are not as good.
Okay. Like so Authy or Google Authenticator, stuff like that.
I think Authy. Yeah, that my understanding is that the YubiKey is so far flawless. I mean, people have obviously lost the keys, but assuming you hold on to your key, then you're pretty bulletproof.
Okay.
The YubiKeys come in a bunch of different form factors. Most of them have a USB port on one side. Some of them are USB-C. Some of them have Lightning ports. Some have NFC contacts. And usually you have to plug the thing in and touch it. So like you have to have physical contact with the device in order for it to authenticate when the time is right. So like there's no like remote man in the middle type exploit situations. Like there's a thing. It's not like a fingerprint sensor or whatever, but generally speaking, people feel, my understanding is that the security community feels like those are more secure than, say, a biometric thing where you have to scan a fingerprint or a face recognition or something like that, which are not easily spoofed, but are more easily spoofed than the YubiKeys.
Yeah, I mean, you could lift somebody's fingerprint off of.
We've done that. We did that and tested.
Right.
We lifted a fingerprint off of glass or something and made a graphite version. I think we did it with crazy glue and Scotch tape.
And it worked?
And graphite.
Yeah.
The trick is like getting the conductance and all that stuff right is hard, but it was something that a bunch of chuckleheads could do in like a normal ass shop.
Yikes,
in like
that's a little
a couple hours.
That's a little frightening to hear, actually.
Yeah. So that's why the face recognition is so much better.
I was going to ask you, do you think Face ID is better than Touch ID?
No, it's like both of them are convenient.
Okay.
If you're really serious about security, you're going to have a giant long ass password on your device.
Yeah.
Or you just mash the home button 5 times. So like the face recognition stuff, you can turn off by smashing the power button a bunch while it's in your pocket.
Oh, interesting.
So like if you're about to get snatched by the fuzz you don't want them to force you to look at your phone and unlock it, then you just do that and then you have to put the code in.
Because that's the legal standard, right?
The legal standard is...
They can force you to use biometric data, but they can't force you to use a numeric code.
It's unclear. I think the fingerprint is unclear, but the face, they can make you look at the phone.
Okay.
I mean, look, if you don't make eye contact with the phone, it doesn't unlock.
Yeah.
Right. Which is fucking bananas.
Yeah.
But I don't like if I'm in a North Korean prison and I mash the button 5 times.
Yeah.
TLDR.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's 2-factor authentication. You can get real in the weeds with this. Like that. I think turn on 2-factor authentication. And this is another thing that your password manager will tell you. It'll say, hey, these sites support 2FA and you're not using it. So sign up. You want that. If you can avoid using SMS 2-factor authentication, that's better because if you get SIM hacked, then that doesn't save you at all.
Somebody can intercept your text messages that have the codes in them.
Exactly. Yeah. Or they just intercept they just take over your phone. Like they hack your phone first and then you're doomed.
Yeah.
And like you can get real, like I said, if you're really concerned about this, you can call Verizon or AT&T or whoever your cell phone provider is and say, look, I want my phone put on super secret lockdown mode. Some carriers do that, some don't. Your mileage may vary based on your carrier and maybe even the person you talk to on the phone.
That's the thing I was actually thinking was like, I bet the results are not consistent when you call and try to get this done.
My guess is that the more famous you are, the more luck you'll have with that experience. So if I call, I'm not going to have a great time. But if the other Will Smith calls, he's probably going to get exactly what he needs.
Yeah.
Also, probably his cell phone is in some holding company's name, so it's going to be harder for them to figure out.
You know what? You just kind of made me think of this mentioning Will Smith, but cell phones and the hacking of cell phones has weirdly been one of those kind of great equalizers between people of that caliber of celebrity and regular people.
Yeah.
Like it was wild, like that wave of phone breaches that happened a few years ago.
When Apple had
like seeing, I mean, it's stupid. This is some full on Us magazine, like, oh, celebrities go get ice cream cones. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, of course, everybody has a phone. But like you don't really think about like everybody has a phone, and everybody uses their phone in the exact same way.
Oh yeah,
like it brings people who are like up on this lofty celebrity pedestal in societal terms,
knocks them down a few tiers.
Yeah, it's like a weirdly humbling thing where you see like, oh well, that's like those people win Oscars, but they can be hacked just like anybody else.
Yeah, hey, Brad Pitt is shitty at password security, just like everybody else.
Exactly.
Yeah. It happened to the fucking president. It happened to presidential campaigns, but on both sides. Yep. Like it is really, really easy to make one mistake. Okay, so other stuff. Don't click links in emails ever.
Yes.
Never. Honestly, just get rid of email. Like move to Slack or Discord or something. But for real, like if your bank sends you a note that says, hey, your account has been compromised, go pick your debit card out of your wallet, call the 800 number on the back and call. If somebody calls you on the phone and says they're with the bank, say, hey, I'm going to call you back at the number on the back of the card. Don't tell them what it is.
No.
Don't let them give you a number to call them back on. Ask how you connect with them after you call the main line for your banks, for your specific account. Just assume that everything in email, everything you get via email is probably a bad actor.
I can't remember if this maybe was out of the DNC hacks or I saw some security expert use the phrase email is skywriting.
Yeah.
How to have when some of those breaches were happening, like basically just like anything in email is like might as well be broadcast to the entire world.
Just assume that every single person in the world is going to see anything you put in email.
Like that's how easy it is to get.
Yeah, because most servers don't even encrypt between like on server to server.
Right.
So most I mean, this is the benefit of switching to something like Gmail versus running your own email server. It is really hard to keep your own email server secure in 2020. They're constantly under threat. It's hard to manage spam. That's why I switched to Gmail in the early 2000s, and I'm very glad that I did because it saved me a lot of hassle over the preceding, anteceding. I can't remember the years between then and now.
Yes. Are you familiar with Proton Mail? Is that even more secure? I feel like I see a lot of reporters.
That's a Russian thing, isn't it?
Is it really?
I think Proton Mail is owned by a Russian company, which
is possible. I don't
probably
know.
5 years ago I said, yeah, that sounds great. Russians are really good at security.
Like I see a lot of reporters say, hey, if you want to get at me in a super secure fashion, this is the email address to use, and it's on that service.
Oh, no. Proton is open source and served in Switzerland, okay, so it's fine. I was mixing that. Proton.ru is the thing I was thinking about, I think.
Is it a mistake to feel like stuff that's open source are potentially more secure?
It depends.
Okay. Because like that's kind of the point I was making about Bitwarden.
Yeah.
For something that's security oriented, to me, it's just a good gesture, I feel like, to expose everything you're doing.
Generally, yeah.
Outside scrutiny.
Assuming that the thing you're talking about is big enough that people do scrutinize it from outside, it's good. Like I use VeraCrypt because of that. It's like an open source follow-up to TrueCrypt, and it's backwards compatible with TrueCrypt volumes. So if you have sensitive information, so for example, if you have you want to keep your tax returns on a hard drive someplace or on a thumb drive. If you're carrying around a thumb drive and going to, say, like themed restaurants and you don't want the stuff that's on that to be exposed to the world should you lose the thumb drive, you can use a piece of software like VeraCrypt to encrypt the entirety of the contents of that drive. Yeah. Keep a version of VeraCrypt on the drive, so no matter which computer you plug it into, you can fire it up and access that information. Yeah. And you can store a really long password in your password manager, so you don't even have to remember anything.
These are all best practices.
It's very good practices. Encrypting that stuff is good. Any external drives that you carry around with you, I think, are good to encrypt. I don't generally encrypt hard drives in computers just because there's a little bit of a performance impact, and the challenge of recovering data if something goes bad.
It's scary.
You have to be real good at backups if you're going to encrypt your hard drives.
So I know NAS has come up quite a bit.
We love NAS. We love getting NAS D.
My giant storage pool on my FreeNAS machine is encrypted because the tutorial when I first got into FreeNAS a couple of years ago, tutorial recommended doing it.
No, Brad.
And I didn't know what I was getting into.
No, can you decrypt it easily or no?
No, absolutely not. Yeah, that's one of the downsides. Like nothing.
So you have to upgrade your pool and copy from
nothing about a ZFS pool really can be changed after it's created.
No.
So whatever.
You can add more disks to it.
Yeah, I'm in the process of finally backing everything up, and I think I'm just going to destroy that pool and recreate it unencrypted.
Yeah, okay.
Because like you have to keep up with a file, you have to keep up with the decryption key.
Yeah.
In the form of a file, and
if you store that on the pool and the pool goes away, bad things, man.
If you lose that file and the disks get they are encrypted at every boot. The OS decrypts them when you boot. But if for any reason you get locked out of that pool and you don't have that key file, like that data's gone forever. Like it's nerve wracking. So,
yeah.
You gotta be careful with encryption.
Well, and Windows has BitLocker built in. I think there's a thing in OS 10 now.
Yeah,
that has been for a decade.
We have to use it at work. I can't remember the name of it. File Vault.
File Vault.
Yes.
Yeah, and it'll do whole hard drive encryption. Like it's pretty seamless. The challenge. I mean, look, on a Mac laptop, it doesn't matter because the SSDs are soldered on the motherboard now.
Yeah.
So like it's not like you can take them out and put them in another machine to get your data off. You're just boned if that thing dies.
Right.
But being careful with encrypted disks is important.
Yes. It's not to be used lightly.
And
I have not enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, it's I looked at that when I was doing my FreeNAS machine a decade ago, 8 years ago or whatever, and I was like, this seems like a bad idea. I'm not going to do this.
Yeah, I regret it frequently.
Well, I mean, next time you upgrade the disks in your pool, you can just copy it over and it'll be fine. I mean, that's kind of the high points. I feel like we may be missing some stuff. Don't click links. Don't answer phone calls. Lockdown. One of the big ones is making sure that your recovery stuff all goes to someplace that's secure, and making that the most secure thing. And then everything downstream from that is going to be less secure, and that's fine.
I don't know, man. You've got me feeling like I should go through and generate passwords for everything that I don't already have them generated.
It's not a bad idea. I mean,
some of that stuff is just inconsequential enough that I don't know if I care.
I think if
stuff like a delivery.com account, like, yes, I lost a little bit of free food.
Well, but like if you think about it as potential vectors, if they can call delivery.com or log in, if they can hack your delivery.com stuff and get your credit card information, then that lets them call Amazon and get your zip code. And then that lets them,
how would they get that number though? Because the whole number shouldn't be available in the account, even if you have the login for it.
You say that, but if you get somebody on the phone, they're going to have the whole number.
But again, we're back
it's
to
also like your
social engineering aspect again. That's why I'm afraid of it.
The social engineering aspect is the big problem.
That's the big question mark because human beings are unreliable and make mistakes all the time.
Well, yeah, and like if you think about calling delivery.com, I apologize for picking on delivery.com. This is a fine service.
They never gave. They said I contacted support and they said they would give me my $65 back, and they never did.
Where's his $65?
That was like not even 2 meals ordering out in San Francisco these days.
Yeah, you can barely get a cheeseburger at McDonald's. The thing is, you're just looking at minimizing threat surface. So like the number of places that people can get personally identifiable information, like for example, a lot of times you can call the bank and you can get access to somebody's bank account if you have the last 3 transactions. So if they have your delivery.com account, then they can go and place 3 orders to delivery.com and then call your bank and say, oh, my last 3 transactions were $12.11.
So I thought about
$7.60 and $5.95.
I thought about that because obviously a lot of services like that, you can opt to save your full payment information and then just make orders without having to reconfirm it every time. But like, I assume common sense is what stopped the people that got into my account from straight up doing that, because at that point, aren't you committing like massive fraud?
We're committing fraud, and you're also presumably giving them your home address or an address where you are known.
Well, they did that anyway. Like, I have the address of the people who.
Oh, really?
I have an address where they got the food delivered. I can't say it's necessarily their address.
Yeah.
But they saved the address in the account. Like I had that, but I assume they were either smart enough or didn't think to actually use my credit card to buy food, because what I'm getting at is I assume that is a pretty different level of crime than.
I mean, that's credit card fraud. Yeah, so yeah. But I mean, the point is, if they want to get into your bank account, then once they do that, then they can get into your bank account. Other things to think about are like PayPal. Like if you have e-commerce stuff that's hooked directly to bank accounts. So if you have a PayPal vendor account and you're connected directly to a checking or savings account, then once they get into PayPal, they can clean you out by PayPaling money from your bank accounts to themselves or to like a series of cutouts basically, until they empty your accounts. So like PayPal, great place to have 2-factor authentication turned on, right?
Yes. Are those services, do you think typically would be pretty good if you did fall victim to something like that? Would they be pretty good about getting your money back? Because like there are like the classic thing about like using a debit card with the bank is like that makes it
good luck,
tough, right?
Well, it used to. It depends on the debit. It depends on your bank, and it depends on the account that you sign up for, and it depends on the debit card.
Right.
So some of them have different levels of protection.
Right. But there are
like fraud protection and stuff like that.
There are instances of using something like debit card where if somebody takes that money, you're just kind of shit out of luck, right?
For a long, long time, I didn't use a debit card because the best practice is to have a bank account that has a few $100s in it that you use with your debit card, and do not carry a debit card for whatever your main that's attached to your main savings account, your main checking account.
Right. Yeah. So I'm just wondering in that same vein how some of these digital intermediaries like PayPal would treat.
Usually PayPal like tells you to get fucked.
Really?
Is my understanding.
No kidding.
Yes.
I thought it would be the opposite.
No, because they'll tell, like, this is why a lot of people don't use anything but a credit card on PayPal. It's because when they have access to your bank, then a lot of your fraud protection stuff goes away. So 2-factor, good password, PayPal for sure.
Yes.
Think about stuff like Venmo, Square Cash, all of the Apple Pay, all of the bazillions of different places that you can connect to your bank account. Do you think we have anything else? I don't know. Oh, here's a good one. When you're at like a conference or a convention and you're in the convention center and you sit down for a meal and you're sitting there and there's a plug right there and there's a USB port on the plug.
Yeah.
Do you plug the phone?
Hell no.
Yeah, that's the right choice.
Yeah.
However, you can get USB cables that are power only. They probably won't charge at like the full maximum speed that your phone will charge. But basically, you just cut the 2 data wires inside the cable, and you'll get 5 milliamps of power.
Okay, I've seen they also sell
500 milliamps. Sorry.
Sell just kind of little in between connectors.
Yeah, it's like a USB condom.
Do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes, basically.
Yeah. The better solution is to carry a battery backup. and just plug into your battery when you need to recharge on the go.
I don't know if I'm being overly paranoid there. Like airplanes are probably fine.
I use airplane seats. I feel like that's maybe. So I haven't seen anybody. I haven't seen any like what's his name? The Brian Krebs hasn't posted any. He's the credit card skimmer guy. He hasn't posted anything about like USB skimmers. I'm sure it's coming.
I was just about to ask if such a thing exists.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure that like there's DEF CON proof of concepts of here's a USB skimmer that just snaps on top of the Alaska. I mean, the thing there is the threat surface is really huge. Like every seat back on Alaska has the same plug.
Can you imagine?
So you design one thing, you make 20,000 of them, and every time you get on a flight, you smack them on your row.
Oof.
And then, but I don't know how you get data back off. I was just
about to say, I wonder how that's being communicated out of there.
Yeah, that's the challenging part.
They'll figure out a way.
I mean, you can't use the in-flight Wi-Fi because you have to CAPTCHA in flight once the plane's off the ground. Presumably, they connect it to Wi-Fi on the terminals when they get where they're going. But anyway, the point is, I haven't seen any attacks like that. But be aware, don't use strange USB ports. Don't use the one in the back of your Uber.
I was just about to say, when I get in an Uber and they offer me a charge cable, that leads to somewhere I can't see.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. I'm good.
Yeah, like
appreciate it.
Yeah, it's like safe sex guidelines we all learned in the 80s when we thought we could have sex and immediately die.
Yes.
Don't think about that before you go sticking your plugs in there.
Yeah. It's a frightening topic.
I mean, it is the one thing I really do think that the best thing you can do is stop using the same passwords everywhere. It is an enormous quality of life improvement, especially if you frequently find yourself trying to figure out what fucking password you set up for eBay 6 months ago and you haven't logged into since or whatever.
So yeah, maybe that's the best way to end this. Like, what are the kind of, let's say, like top 3 things? If people listening have just never thought about their digital security and they want to just like lock down the most obvious stuff, it's like
number 1 is never click a link in email.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Like never, ever click a link in email.
But I mean, like the things you can do right now, like you said, going out and changing all your passwords,
setting up a password manager, turning on 2-factor are the 2 biggest things. Yeah. And going through and doing an audit of the important accounts like bank, credit cards. PayPal, Venmo, Square, Apple, all of those things that make sure you have a cohesive account recovery situation. The other thing is when you turn on 2-factor, a lot of times that will disable the ability to recover an account with like a lost your email, forgot my password button. So you'll get a series of keys, like 16-digit or 24-digit encryption keys that will give you one-time access or multi-time access in some cases back to that account. You'll get like 16 of them usually.
Where's a good place to keep those? Would you say
this is
that's an esoteric question that actually I think is super relevant.
It's not. You should print those out. Well, I keep mine in a cloud folder. I'm not going to say which one, but it's in one of the cloud storage folders.
Okay.
I don't think it's a great solution.
That's probably, I was going to say, that's maybe not the best.
I've also printed them all out and put them in a fire safe that's in my office.
Interesting.
So I used to have them in a safe deposit box.
Yeah.
And then my lawyer was like, hey, safe deposit boxes are impossible to get back into if you die or something happens to you.
Or even it might just be the Sunday and you can't get into the bank.
Right. So he was like, buy a $300 fire safe. This is the one I recommend. Wirecutter likes it. Put it in your office and put them in a folder that's like, put all of your 2-factor authentication stuff, all of your tax documents, your will, all of that stuff in the fire safe.
I'm trying to think, like, what are the things that you might have a set of one-time codes for? Like, obviously your primary email address.
Anything with 2-factor. So primary email, Dropbox.
Oh, okay. I guess maybe
PayPal.
I either didn't generate or don't keep up with the codes.
You got to keep up with those.
All of those. Yeah, I have them for my email.
Yeah.
But not much else, I don't think. I should probably go regenerate those.
It's worth generating the codes.
Yeah. What do you think about, maybe, I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but maybe just like print out a little laminated card and keep it in your wallet?
I don't want to carry that around with me.
No.
I want it secure.
Yeah.
Right?
Wallet is not, I guess not.
I mean, how often has your wallet been, how many times have you, I mean, I haven't lost my wallet since I was in elementary school, probably.
Yeah, wait, you had a wallet in elementary school?
Well, like 5th grade.
Wow.
How did you pay for lunch?
I just shoved $2 in my pocket.
Oh.
I don't think I carried a wallet until I was like a junior in high school.
I was wearing khakis and like button-down shirts. I was like a young NASA employee in 1985.
Real young Sheldon over here.
Hey, quit bringing your CBS bullshit into our... no. Yeah, I wouldn't carry it on my wallet.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I think it's too important. It's like carrying your social security card. You don't carry that either.
Sure, yeah. So somewhere in your house.
Fire safe.
It's probably the best. Okay.
What if your house burns down?
That's fair.
I mean, here's the thing. Theoretically, I have my phone with me all the time.
Yeah.
Keeping them in a file on the phone, which will be locked and is destroyed. The data on it is destroyed if somebody tries to log in it too many times unsuccessfully. Probably is good. The only downside is you want to have a backup that's not in your phone, because what if you smash your phone, it doesn't work?
Yeah.
It catches on fire because it's a Samsung Galaxy Note 7 and the battery explodes, whatever.
Also, I'm trying to think, like, maybe this is easier on Android, but what's a good way to keep data on yeah, this probably is more iPhone centric, but like, I'm trying to think of a way to put data on an iPhone where that data is not also immediately reflected in some kind of cloud service, and I can't immediately think of. I guess you could type it into a notes.
Well, it's still going to get backed up to iCloud.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think of a way to put information just on a phone and only on that phone.
You can buy there's apps that will encrypt notes for you.
Okay.
But like the place to start is to dump into your Dropbox a folder that has all of your two-factor recovery codes. The second best thing to do is to take those files and print them and put them in your fire safe.
Okay.
And then also you want to save things like your Windows key, right? Like if you have a Windows key that you use when you restore, that's a good place to put that stuff too.
Yeah.
So
and it seems like modern password managers are pretty good about letting you put things that are not passwords in there. You can just create like sort of notes entries there. But then store stuff like that in there too. But
then when we talked about the audit thing, part of the process is thinking about, okay, so what happens if my recovery passwords are on my Dropbox? How do I get into my Dropbox if I don't have if my phone and my computers are gone? Right. So then you can either share it with a family member or like 1Password. When you have a 1Password family account, I was able to say, okay, my wife is able to access this in case of an emergency.
Okay.
And she can do it, but I'm going to get a notification that says she's been digging around my passwords. So it's literally this person is allowed to re-grant me access to my stuff in case something goes horribly wrong and I can't authenticate myself.
Does this stuff ever feel like a full-time job to you?
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
I mean, but it's like the FreeNAS server where it's a lot of work occasionally, like very infrequently, and most of the time it's just like seamless and in the background.
Yeah.
I think my next step is to buy a YubiKey and start YubiKeying.
Wow.
But I don't know. I don't know if I care that much.
Is that a keychain thing? Probably
it's a keychain thing. Probably.
Keep on there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
it feels good to lock it down. It's a lot of work, like you said, but it's just some nice peace of mind.
It's really nice not to have to remember passwords.
Yeah,
like that is the big win out of this whole thing.
And feeling like your stuff, like your financial accounts, are protected because it's just so much more connected than it was 20 years ago.
Well, yeah, and the unfortunate thing is a lot of the banks still are using SMS for authentication and stuff like that because they're not on two-factor.
Yeah, I've got a credit card that does not allow like any kind of modern two-factor, and I'm like, what? You're a giant fucking financial organization, like get your shit together.
Well, they're really good internally but really bad externally. Who knew?
No surprise.
If you enjoyed the show or you have, I'm sure we made mistakes on this because this is really complicated and we are at best dilettantes. I am at best a dilettante on this. So we would love to hear thoughts. We'll talk about it on our next Q&A episode. So send them to techpod@content.town. Or hit us on Twitter at Sweatpants Tech Pod, or I'm Will Smith on Twitter.
Yes, I am at Brad Shoemaker.
And if you like the podcast, leave a review on iTunes. Tell your friends. We love to hear people telling their friends about us.
Spread the good word.
Yeah. Or if you don't like us, leave an iTunes review and we read those too.
Either way, get up on your rooftop and yell about it.
And we've been talking about, people have asked us about stuff like user support, Patreon, stuff like that. And I think we're going to start working on that soon because like, it doesn't cost a ton of money, but it takes a fair amount of time, and it would be nice to, to not have this be a positive expense rather than a negative expense.
Sure.
Black instead of red.
I can get behind that.
Yeah. We'll see y'all next week. Thanks for listening. Bye. The show's over, but we'd still love to know how we're doing. Let us know at survey.content.town. We're not collecting demographics, your personal information, or anything insidious. We just want to know what you do and don't like about the show. The whole thing will take just a minute or two to fill out and will help us figure out how we're doing. For a limited time, everyone who fills out the survey will get our undying affection. You can't beat that. Again, the address is survey.content.town. That's survey.content.town. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.